a mechanical engineer, a former slave turned wealthy entrepreneur, and a 17th century king have in common? Well, the answer is one of the summer's hottest novels. I sit down with the author coming up next.
From Los Angeles, this is a special report with Areva Martin.
My guest today is Vanessa Riley. Vanessa writes Regency romance and historical fiction. She has written 20 books, including her latest title, Island Queen, a historical fiction which has been optioned for an adaptation for television. Vanessa has an interesting history. She holds a doctorate degree in mechanical engineering and a master's degree in industrial engineering and engineering management from Stanford University. She also has a bachelor's and master's degrees in mechanical engineering from Penn State University. She's a mother, she's a wife, and a frequent speaker at STEM conferences. Good morning and welcome to the show, Vanessa.
Areva, thank you for having me.
First of all, I got to say congratulations on your book, Island Queen. This book just came out July 2021. The reviews have been amazing. The book was a GMA's Buzz Pick and is being described by the New York Times as a riveting, transformative work of historical fiction. Did you have any idea when you wrote this book that the response would be so incredibly positive?
No. And this is the book that I didn't think I'd ever get to write. So just seeing how people are digging in, because, it's kind of a long book. And
it's beautiful.
And just locking into Dorothy's story and being transported to that world and understanding what it took for her to have a seat at the table. It's just amazing.
Yeah, so for those of you that haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I'm hoping after this interview that you will grab it if you haven't had a chance to do so. The book is based on the life of Dorothy Thomas, a Black woman who was born into slavery, but buys her freedom and becomes one of the wealthiest and most powerful landowners in the colonial West Indies. For you, Vanessa, in this book, this is mainstream historical fiction, and you have been writing a lot of Regency romance novels. What inspired you to write a book about Dorothy Thomas?
Finding her, really. Finding her. She's the needle in the haystack that actually should be exposed to the world. She was famous during her time frame. This woman who, like you said, bought her freedom and the freedom of her family by saving money and then building businesses across the West Indies, from Montserrat to Grenada to Barbados to the colony of Demerara, which is present-day Guyana. Thousands of miles this journey covers. And literally, she does some really, I don't want to give some of the secrets away, but she does things that impact generational wealth for women of color, Black women through the ages. And her name has been erased from the books. And when I found her, she was a sketch, literally a sketch that I had to figure out who she was and do the tracing through all these archival documents in order to find.
Yeah, I read someplace that you were inspired because you saw this photo, and now you're describing it as a sketch of Dorothy, and that piqued your interest in who is this woman? And you went on this mission to find out everything there was to know about Dorothy Thomas.
Yeah. See, many people don't realize that Black people were part of the Regency. We're part of the Georgian era. When you think of the American Revolution, there are people who came from Haiti who literally fought to help America have its freedom. But there's this kind of myopic blind spot. And so you can assume there were kings and queens in Africa. And then there's this big void, and then Black people appeared in 1865 just to be freed. No, we are all over the diaspora, and we are connected into this fabric, and it's been systematically washed away. And so when I find this sketch of this woman, and she's being lovingly embraced by Prince William Henry, the future King William IV, I want to know who she is, because this cartoonist, Gilroy, he's an ist. He's a misogynist. He's a sexist. You name it. If he draws a woman, she's going to make him look horrible. He gets to draw a Black woman. He goes to town, makes it look incredibly grotesque.
Wow.
But in this sketch, the woman is drawn beautifully. So she's the tattle. He's saying, look what your prince is doing in the West Indies. And so I had to find who this woman was.
Is that what spoke to you about, Dorothy, the fact that this sketch artist had drawn her in a way that was different than the way most Black women during that era are portrayed? I want to know what spoke to you about Dorothy, because, I don't think there were thousands of Dorothys who, bought their way out of slavery and became, wealthy entrepreneurs, but there are obviously other women who had success stories. But something spoke to you about Dorothy. What was it?
It was, who was this woman to be treasured? Because some of the misogyny or just conception of Black women, of women of color, not being desirable, not being treasured, and just the way the embrace is in this sketch, it's a very loving embrace. And you just want to know, is this a figment of somebody's imagination? Is this just to rile people up because it's a political cartoon, or is this something deeper, something that's going on? And the time frame, you have the abolition movement is going, so the people are wanting freedom. It's matching the calls for freedom every other part of the world, because America wants its freedom from the kings. France wants its freedom from its kings. Haiti wants its freedom from everybody who's trying to do something. And then you have all of these islands, all these people of the islands. They all want freedom too. So it's like this dichotomy that's going on. And when I see this sketch of two different races coming together in this loving embrace, I want to know that story. And that led me to Dorothy.
And, I read, Vanessa, that you are a meticulous and methodical researcher. So how long did it take you to do the research on Dorothy to bring her to life as a character?
It took 6 years. It took 6 years because, one, women in history are not very well documented. The fact that we have Anne Frank's diary is a miracle, because women are not that well documented. And Black women and women of color are especially not that well documented. So literally, I had to, I'm trying to figure this out, and I just followed the rich man. So I followed Prince William, and he's the sailor king. So he's commanding frigates, and you find him. He's going to the islands. He's breaking brothels in Jamaica. He's having all these kind of affairs in all these different islands. But when he gets to the island of Dominica, he's different. His boys are telling in their diaries, in their letters, talking about he's with that mulatto woman again. She's such a handsome woman. And then I find a notification that he's danced with Dorothy Kirwan at one of the mulatto balls. So I had a name. And from this name, you start doing the research. For women, our reproductive history is our history. So literally filing birth registrations across these islands, you begin to say, how did she get from here to there? And what would make her go? And she's, as her family is building these records, and then you start finding leases and buildings, things she's bought and built. And so you're able to put these pieces back together.
So I bought your book at a local bookstore here in Los Angeles, and the woman who runs the bookstore has read the book, and she's read some of your Regency romance novels. So she wanted me to ask you, and so I'm going to ask the question that she wanted to know is, how was the research for this book different than the research that you've done for some of your other popular romance novels?
This was more extensive, but I built my world. So I'm trying to become an expert of somewhere between 1750 to 1830. If women and women of color have done something important, supportive, interesting, dynamic, I want to know it. Particularly, I want us to go beyond the borders of the United States. The West Indies is so many stories that haven't been told. And so I'm putting those pieces back together. And so my romances are some idea I found or some snippet of history I found that I think that just needs to be told.
Now, in this book, Island Queen, you frame it like a diary. That Dorothy is writing for her family, let's say. But, that was a literary choice that you made. Why did you make that choice to write it like a diary?
I wanted it to give you quick perceptions of what's going on. So when you write a diary entry, you're kind of in the moment, right? There's not a lot of, not necessarily a lot of setup, but you're in the moment. You're feeling those feelings, the actions. I wanted you to get that sense. And once again, women are not that well recorded. So I'm kind of my homage to Dorothy. This is your diary. I'm willing you into the world and putting these things on pages. But it's because it's such a long book. And I move you through 67 of her 90 years. Basically, she lived 3 lifetimes because the average lifetime for a woman was only 30 years back then. I put it in a diary form just so that you could move with her and you could see these things, how they impact her life and make it digestible.
Yeah, just in reading some of the detail, I mean, you have some incredible detail about her life. And so this is a fictional account, though, right? This isn't like a documentary. This is a factual account of Dorothy's life. How did you decide, like in the book, again, we won't give away everything, but, she runs away at 13 because she's being sexually assaulted by a half brother. Mm-hmm. And, she actually gets pregnant and she has a child. How do you decide to make that a part of Dorothy's experience?
One, that part is true. Of the incest within her family. That part is true. And she has 2 daughters as a result of incest. But at the same time, I'm telling you this magnificent story. I wanted you to feel where she came from. I don't want this book because she succeeded as an excuse for enslavement. Enslavement was wrong and evil. And you cannot have her story and understand the magnitude of the things she became and went through without that beginning. So it was very important to put that in the novel, to just capture why she was so desperate to be freed, why she was desperate to be away from that system, and then how that system impacts everything that she does going forward.
So how do we know, though, Vanessa, again, which parts of the story are actually part of history and happened to Dorothy? Like, I found it interesting that how she started accumulating her wealth. She's almost like a modern day, a search firm or, employment agency. She's hiring out these housekeepers to new, people who come into these colonies. Was that true, or is that?
That's all true. That's all true. So I would say there's between 80 to 95% of the book is true. Okay. What I added was the motivations to kind of help you make it make sense, because I had to make it make sense. Okay. Once again, when you see her moving from these colonies and she's spending certain amounts of time and she's built these businesses, why would you move on? You're making money. What would be the impetus of the reason you would have to do that? So I had to give you the motivations, but they were always grounded in facts. Rousseau Dominica is where people went to certify their manumissions. The state, it was one of the British places to record your documents. So you see the movement, and once again, following her movement, following where she had her children, the story just came to life. And the things that seemed the most unusual are true. That's the funny part. That's the true part.
That seems so unusual to me that someone in that period would think that that's a business. Like that's a modern day, 2021 business that it's very lucrative. And obviously, she made it into a lucrative business too. You mentioned, or we know factually now, as you're telling us, that Dorothy bought her way out of slavery. She eventually owns plantations and herself owns slaves. So that may come as a surprise to a lot of people that there were free Black people during this period who themselves owned slaves. Help us understand, what was that dynamic like during this period?
And that was one of the hardest parts for me to reconcile, because, when I'm discovering this woman, I myself don't want to make her superwoman. She is extremely human, and I hope that comes across in the book. But it is true. Black people, people of color owned people. They participated in the system because that's how endemic the system was. And particularly in the colony of Demerara, you had to. If you were a planter, if you had a plantation, you had to, because what happens was it's almost like they wanted everybody stained with the same sin so that everybody has the same drive and desires. Because when there were people who didn't, they systematically got them out of business. They had higher interest rates. They would make it harder and harder for them to get laborers.
They didn't want to own slaves, you mean?
Yes.
They paid a penalty for that.
They paid a penalty. And for me, as I'm thinking, as Dorothy's thinking, she's seeing this. She's seeing people get ruined. One of her son-in-laws gets ruined because he abstained from this system. So there's this thing about what to have a seat at the table and to keep that seat at the table I think she had to play the game, and she was very good at politics. And in a way, I think her and some of the other women decided it was better for us to keep these people out of the system because they were going to be protected than to allow and to give them a chance to be manumitted, to give them a chance to be free, just like she was freed. So, right. but it's a difficult part. And once again, we always complain about history being whitewashed and sanitized and the difficult things. I wanted you to see all of it. So I could not leave that part out of her book.
Well, you had an opportunity too. You could have made her into a freedom fighter, but you didn't. I mean, she was a businesswoman. She was about her money and her business, So I imagine that you had to decide. Like you said, you didn't want to make her bigger than life. You didn't want to make her a superwoman. You wanted to make her real. And you wanted to tell her story as it existed at that time. I would imagine that there may have been some impulse, because as a Black person, we want to make everyone freedom fighters, right?
Yes.
Fighting against slavery.
Yeah. I like to think that I think she was very vocal on wanting abolition, but she knew from the planter side that they weren't just going to give up their slaves. So she knew that something had to happen. I firmly believe that she and the other women supported the abolitionist movement, but from the inside. So it's almost like you're on the inside. How are you going to work against the system? By maintaining that seat, I'm going to help progress happen. And if I don't have that seat, and they'll never hear my voice, they'll never hear that reason. I could see that in her, but at the same time, she was very business oriented, and she wasn't going to fail. That's of all the things I found out about her. I just had that feeling she does not want to fail. So she will do what she had to, even things that may sicken her, but she would do it because she's not going to fail. Yeah.
So Dorothy, in addition to being an entrepreneur, Dorothy had a couple boyfriends. Dorothy was hooking up with a couple of folks. So
there you go.
You got to write about, you got to put some of your romance, skills to play in writing about Dorothy. So tell us again briefly. We know ultimately about Prince William, but she has some other. She had eventually like 10 kids?
Just 10 children. And there are 3 significant men in her life. There's Sells, who's also a planter, who she meets very early on in Montserrat. And once again, all this is true. These are all these little pieces of the puzzle that had to be put back together. So there's Sells, there's Joseph Thomas, who is a solicitor that she meets in Dominica. And once again, you have Prince William, who the future King William IV. To me, just reading the accounts, Dorothy was a beautiful woman. A beautiful, dark-skinned woman who was like a magnet. I think when she walked in the room, she just lit up the world and people wanted to know her. I've seen reports of how people loved to come to her salon to talk about politics. She was just, I think she was such a presence that she could not be denied.
And obviously, the book is the story of this woman, Dorothy Kirwan Thomas, but it's also, some much bigger issues that you are discussing or are presenting in this book, aspects of the West Indian colonial culture, the roots of colorism and class privilege. How did you decide that you wanted, the book to be also be bigger than Dorothy and to tackle some of those bigger themes?
The world of the West Indies is such an important fabric to this entire time frame. People euphemistically call it the sugar trade, right? Like it's all sweet in it. It's enslavement, and that ran the world. 75 to 80% of the entire economies of the world are during this time frame are driven on enslavement. So everyone has a piece of why they don't want to free people. They don't want to pay labor, and this advantage on sugar and indigo and coffee, that's making the world spin. And somebody who's doing business across all these colonies, which multiple entities, because some of the colonies are French colonies, some are Dutch colonies, some are English colonies. Spain is trying. America actually tried a few, but just never was successful. So everybody wants a piece of these West Indies, and there's not very much written about this time frame. And this really shapes so much of the world. And for me, Dorothy is a part of this world. And to really understand her, you have to understand the world. So I brought in all of these influences, which somebody who is setting up businesses like she is, mercantilism, intercolonial trade, traveling back and forth between, Demerara, which is below the equator, all the way up to Scotland and Ireland and England. She knows the world. She knows of the world, and the world at that time knew her. And so you had to have all that in this novel.
So I said at the opening of the book that it's been adopted or optioned at least for a television series. Do you know if the thinking is that this is going to be a movie, or is this going to be a ongoing dramatic series? Have they had those kinds of discussions yet? Yeah.
So the initial conversations have been something like The Crown, where you would have multiple seasons. And literally, in my head, I see three Dorothys. There's young Dorothy, or young Dolly. Then there's Doll, where she's in her season. And then there's Dorothy, that businesswoman, that woman that's trying to change the world for her family. Julianne Robinson and Victoria Fee of Longboat Productions, they fell in love at manuscript stage. And when Adjo Ando did the did the audio with Harper Audio, first of all, she's absolutely freaking amazing. It was the most beautiful time frame of just listening to her voice and the passion. But she also fell in love with it, and she's coming on as executive producer. So these two Bridgerton alumni within the Longboat structure are they're going to bring Dorothy's world to life on the small screen. So I'm excited.
Wow, that has to be exciting. Any time frame? Yeah, I mean, I know these projects can take a long time to get to the, screen.
I know nothing. My lips are sealed. I know nothing. I cannot say anything. But I keep your eye on that space.
Okay, I love it. I love it. And Bridgerton, I'm sure, and you mentioned The Crown, have opened doors for projects like, the Island Queen. You mentioned Dorothy having three phases, Dow and Dolly and Dorothy. Who in your mind are the perfect Dolly, Dow, and Dorothy? When you think about actresses that are out, who are working today, and maybe some who, we don't see regularly, but you think, really embody the spirit of this character.
See, I don't know, but everybody needs to start talking to their friends, because I think there is some unknown actress who is going to light the world on fire as Doll/Dolly. And this woman has to bring it. You read the book. She's got to bring it. She's going to be firing on all cylinders. I don't know if we know her yet, but we will know her when she steps out on stage.
I see visions of someone like Viola or Angela Bassett, Viola Davis, particularly when she gets to a certain age. Obviously not in her teen years or those early years, but they both are actresses that have that kind of attitude that obviously Dorothy has, and that kind of panache and confidence. So the gravitas that someone like this character has to have. So I think there's some folks that may be out there that could really do justice to this character.
Oh, absolutely.
But as you said, we got to keep our eye on this space.
Keep down the space.
What happens? So I got to ask you an obvious question, Vanessa. Here you are with the most incredible degrees from Stanford, the top university. Well, I don't know. I went to the University of Chicago. So we'll just say it's a good school, right? Here you are with a PhD, couple of master's degrees. I think I counted 5 degrees, and I could be off by 1 or 2. But they're in this analytical, quantitative, probably the hardest degrees that anyone could get in the planet. And you're writing historical fiction and romance. Help us with that transition, because I'm how did you go from being an engineer to writing romance novels?
Well, this goes back to my mom. When I was growing up, I was gifted in both mathematics and writing. And my mom sat me down and she says, "Baby, you always have to pay your bills." And math does pay your bills. And so I went to some of the best schools, worked for some of the best companies, General Motors and NASA, and in a whole number of startups. And she was absolutely right. Math pays the bills. So boys and girls, math pays the bills. But when you have,
mom.
but when you have a passion for something, it doesn't go away. And there were times in my life, I actually had a difficult pregnancy, and the doctors told me I had to sit still if I wanted things to go well. And of course, I wanted things to go well. And for me to having to sit still is like, just shoot me now. Okay. I can't do that. So my husband, taking pity on me, actually brought down some boxes for me to organize, and it had some of my old journals. And I was like, oh, I could write this story better. I know more now. And that just started the passion return. And you just started writing and writing and writing. But all the stories, I'm a Jane Austen person. I love this time frame, but it hadn't been diverse enough. It hadn't shown us in these pictures and these themes. And so I love bringing these stories because we were there. There were 20 to 30,000 free Blacks living in London during the time of Jane Austen. And we just never see that. And I think those stories are important.
Yeah, some of your earlier books, an Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler. Really interesting names. A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby. You like threes, right?
Yes, I do like threes.
In threes. You said you like Jane Austen. You said you like that period. You said that it wasn't diverse enough, but why romance in that period? Why, focus on what they call Regency romance?
Okay. One, I'm a sucker for a happily ever after. I want to show how love survives. And particularly, we've had these very challenging times as of late. People want to just know everything's going to be okay. And in the romance, the way the stories are structured, you are guaranteed a happy ever after. People are going to go through challenges and, some difficulties, and then they will find the way to each other, and the world's going to be a better place. And I like those kind of stories. And those are the ones I've always been drifted towards, from a Beverly Jenkins to a Brenda Jackson to a Julia Quinn, a Sarah McLean. I love all these stories. But the Regency has always been in my heart from reading. I was, like I said, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park. We get to Sam Denton, her very last book, where the richest woman in the book is a woman from the West Indies, a mulatto woman from the West Indies. And I was like, see, I'm home. Somebody needs to take up Jane's mantle and keep writing these stories.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Beverly Jenkins, Brenda Jackson, Jasmine Guillory. I've had them all on the show. I've had a chance to sit down with them. Beverly, is like the mother of Black romance, has written over 40 books, has been out there for 2 decades. Are you able to write in this genre? You think because of the work that Beverly and Brenda and those women who have been writing for many years have done?
Absolutely. If it not for them building the foundation to show that regardless of race, regardless of the hard times, people have found ways to have their love survive, I would not be able to write my stories. They have paved the way. They've opened doors, and they are such gracious, such generous people. They are always helping new writers coming up, and it's amazing to sit at their feet. But I would not be able to write the stories I'm writing if not for the people who've gone before me. And like I said, I never thought I'd be able to tell this story because I didn't know if the world was ready to singularly focus on a Black woman who beat the odds and became a significant power during her time frame. Usually we have to couch them as the best friend or some duality story. And my editor, Rachel Kahn, was like, no, I want her story. I want to focus on her. And I'm ever grateful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Jasmine is a Stanford lawyer and you're a Stanford engineer. It's just interesting to see, women who started out on one path, professional careers, super, educated, who end up, unleashing their creative power in this romance genre. And one thing that I love about your book and the books that you've written is the centering of these Black women. And Beverly does that in her books. Brenda, I think many of you that write in this genre do that. Why do you think that's so important that, not just having Black women to show that there's Black love and that, Black people do love each other. We're not just obsessed with slavery and, some of the other things people think we're obsessed with, but romance is very much a part of our community. But also that these women, they're lovers, they're fighters, they're business women. These are complex characters.
You have to, because the world hasn't seen it. When you think about the books you're growing up, it was rare. To get a Beverly book, a Brenda book was a rare treat. They weren't. It was hard to find them in the bookstores. There was no Amazon. I am that old. There was no Amazon, so it was difficult to find these things. And so when you got that one book, you treasured it because you were able to see yourself in a sweeping, epic story where you were treasured, where you had power, you had agency, you could do the things that you wanted to do, or at least dream through this person. So I believe in centering Black women, women of color, at the heart of the narratives I write. I'm passionate about showing our full agencies in these stories and to reclaim the history, because yes, there has been suffering, but there has been joy, there has been hope, and love has always survived. And we need to see that.
Yeah, I just, Island Queen, this book, like I said, GMA fell in love with it, made it one of its, buzz reads for the summer. New York Times had nothing but, amazing things to say about it. What are some of the things you're hearing from readers? Anything that surprised you that you've heard in a direct message or, a social media post or someone just sending you an email? Talk to me about what you're saying. That
has been amazing. I have had so many emails and DMs where people sound like they're crying because they're so happy to see us in this way, represented this way. I have held, so many of my Caribbean folks have been just happy to see us seize the narrative, because it's been taken or abandoned or just completely obliterated, and to see us once again centered as the focus of the story. People are loving it. So many people, they don't want it to end. I was like, that's a long book and y'all don't want it to end, really? They want
part two. They're like, what are you working on part two? Huh?
That's true. I've never been a request for that. I am over the moon. I didn't expect it, but I know, I wanted to put everything into this book, and I put everything in this book. And I am just amazed. I feel so blessed to be able to tell Dorothy's stories. It's a privilege to tell these stories. And I'm just so glad that I did it well and that people are enjoying it.
Did you do any traveling, Vanessa? Did you go to the islands? I know you were doing this, fastidious research. You said 6 years worth, but did it involve, work on location?
That was the last piece that COVID knocked out. So I had this, because once again, the islands of today aren't quite the islands of yesteryear, but there's still historic sites on especially in Grenada. There's in Demerara as well, Guyana as well. And so I had this plan, and then this thing shut the world down. Okay. And so we had to make do. So I thank every YouTuber out there who's done extensive videos, because it was helpful.
Thank God, like you said, for the internet, you're able to sit at home and be, taken away, transported to those locations.
Yes.
Did I read, and I want to make sure I got this right, that you self-published some of your earlier novels?
Yes. Yeah. So from between books 2 and 10, those were self-published. When I started, it was sort of a novel idea for myself to write these books. But the browner my narratives became, it became a little difficult to find placement. Wow. And there's a point where people believe that you can write. You believe you can write. You have talent for it. But no one wants to take that investment and take that try. They're like, we don't know how big this market is for a Regency story written by a Black woman focused on on Black characters. We don't know. And so I had to invest in myself. So I decided that I was going to self-publish the bargain. So did cover design, got editorials, all the pieces. Cause don't be fooled. Self-publishing is really, really hard work. To do it right, it is really, really hard.
Amen you on that one. I can co-sign on that. Very difficult and takes a tremendous investment of your money and your time. Mm-hmm.
But this little book, The Bargain, came out with and at that point I'd burned through my budget and had no advertising. And people just saw the cover on Amazon and a few other places, and we had like 1,000 sales in the first week. Yeah. So to me, it always told me there was people want these stories. That was The Bargain.
The Bargain?
The Bargain.
Okay.
The Bargain.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if my producer can pull it up, and I definitely want to show it. So that book was your self-published book that really took off.
That took off. And that showed me that, yes, there's a market and it's definable. You just have to give them quality books for them to read, to tell their friends and tell their friends. And thank you, every one of you who told your friends.
And bought the bargain.
And started me on this journey, because that really helped everything take off. And by, I would say, book 10 or 12 or
report. There we go. There we go.
That's the bargain. That's her. That's Precious Jewel. She's
Miss Precious. And so what was that journey like? Because there's so many of my viewers. We do these author series where we bring on, amazing best-selling New York Times best-selling authors. And we always get asked the question, because, so many people say they have a book inside of them. They want to write a book. They have a story. They don't know where to get started. They're intimidated by the process. They don't know how to get an agent. They think they can't write a book unless they have an agent. But you've been on both sides of it. You've been a self-publisher that knows the trials and tribulations of self-publishing, and now you have agent, you have publisher, you have TV option. You kind of got everything on.
I have a film agent now.
You got it all. So, what was that journey like, though, from writing that book, The Bargain, getting that attention, and then being able to actually get a big publishing house and agent to take your work seriously, to take you on, to sign you as a client, because that's a huge step.
It's I never sat on my skills, so to speak. I always was pushing the envelope in storytelling. And I would go and I would take classes just to improve the skills, because you want to get better and better in telling your story. So I'm, several courses. Margie Lawson is I'm a huge Margie Lawson fan, just helping me tell better stories, because once you tell better stories, people will take notice. And that's what's happened in my career. So as we move through all my self-published books, somewhere around I think number 10 or 12, traditional publishing starts knocking again. Entangled publishers wanted stories. They wanted somebody to write, I think, Victorian at the time. And I was like, no, I don't write Victorian. I only do Regency and Georgian. Come on now, get with the program. But they were wonderful. And that was the first time my work got national recognition. So it got reviewed in NPR, the Washington Post, and the knowledge of, wait a minute, somebody is writing people of color who are in the Regency. They're not writing them as servants. They're not writing them as being enslaved. These are middle class to upper class people who are living lives and doing, exciting things, and having their happy ever afters. It caught on because everybody wants the big poofy dress. Everybody wants to dress up and go to balls and do these, these times of yore. And I was able to deliver that, and still delivering that. And, with Kensington, coming in with the Rogues and Remarkable Women series. So you had Duke the Lady and the Baby, an Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler. the platforms have just continually opened up, and I'm just amazed. I'm humbled. But like you said, it is a lot of hard work. Just writing a book and putting it up does not work. There is marketing. And if you are one who sits on your talents and just puts out a book because you think putting out a lot of books will make you wealthy, no, putting out great stories makes you makes you, gain your market, keeps people coming back, keeps people buying your books.
No, really great advice. I always like to, give people I always like to ask the authors what their journey has been like, because I hope someone gets inspired, who's sitting out there saying they have a book idea, they don't know how to get it started, or for folks who are disillusioned by thinking, they're going to get wealthy or rich on their first book. I want to, give them a reality check. So, I want them to come to Jesus in terms of understanding what the book business is like, and how difficult and competitive it can be, but how rewarding, because on the other side of that, we also like to show, the rewards and being able to tell these really important stories. How do you decide? Like, we know how you got to Dorothy and the Island Queen, but, when you're writing in that Regency category, how do you decide who you're going to, whose story you're going to tell?
Usually I find some really interesting nugget, and I'm like, there's got to be a story here. So one time I was doing research, and I found that women would put ads in the London Morning Post for husbands. Mm-hmm. So women putting ads, this is circa 1803, putting ads in newspapers saying, woman of esteem looking for man of such and such situation, object matrimony. First of all, I'm like,
modern day dating apps,
modern day dating in 1803. I'm like, that is crazy, right? And then I was like, well, if you're a woman of color, you're not going to go necessarily to Almax and have teas and all this sort of stuff. That would be a way that these women could meet men and do it in a safe way, and nothing but foolishness can come from all of this. So that's the genesis of The Brides of London, which is another book actually that's coming out on the 24th of August.
Oh,
yeah, my first mass market.
Breaking news here.
That's my first mass market.
Brides of London.
The Brides of London.
24th.
Yes.
So this is back in your Regency series.
Regency time frame.
Regency romance.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to look for that. Give us a little preview. What's Brides of London about?
Brides of London is actually, you get two stories in that book. And it's a group of women who put ads in the newspaper to find husbands. And in the first one, The Bittersweet Bride, she's desperate to find a husband because if she doesn't, she could lose custody of her son. And as she's picking up her letters, the man who broke her heart, who she thought was dead, is standing right there holding one.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you have The Bashful Bride. Everybody has been starstruck by someone. She's totally in love with the most handsome actor in town, in London. And her father is about to force her into a marriage that she doesn't want. So she, instead of running away, she ends up meeting this man and proposes to him. And so he, for some reason that you'll find in the book, needs a wife quickly too. And so they decide to do it, and they're going to run off to Gretna Green. And so it becomes a Regency road trip from hell.
Okay. Ooh, that sounds steamy. Can't wait to put my hands on that. Brides of London. Okay. Well, congratulations. That's going to make what, 21 books for you or 22?
22. I think it's old enough to go get a drink now.
Oh, all right. Well, we got a toast to that. 22 books. Over what time period? Is this over 10 years?
Since 2013. So what are we talking about? 8 years?
8 years. Oh my God. So you're doing on average like a book and a little bit of more of a book a year. So
yes.
I know Beverly told me she writes a book every year. And so you're definitely a little outpacing Beverly by a little some. So, wow, Vanessa.
It's more skewed. It's because, it's like one book. Okay, 3 books. Okay.
Well, obviously you're busy, and I just real quickly, I know they said you give talks at STEM conferences, but I don't know we have time to be, bothered with STEM when you're writing romance. But is mechanical engineering and STEM still pretty much a part of your daily life?
Yes. Yeah. I run a small software company and we support customers. But you will probably talk more to some of my advisors and stuff than my day to day. Because I do, I'm getting very close to full-time writing, which I'm enjoying. But no, you can't give up the engineering.
Well, no, because Mama said math pays the bill. So
math pays the bills. But if you guys keep going out and buying, this will pay bills.
Right. You're well on your way to being a full-time professional writer, and your last two books, Brides of London and Bashful Bride, again, make 22 books for you. And, if you like romance, definitely pick those up. If you love a good historical fiction book, Island Queen is the book for you. It's going to be on the TV screen. I think the audience should start writing in the comments section who they think the three versions of Dorothy should be. We have the young Dorothy, who's a teenager, who's being molested by her brother, but has to break away. We have the midlife. I can't even call her middle age because she died at what we call middle age today, but we have the young version of Dorothy, and then obviously we have the more mature woman who's, birthed 10 children, had 3 love affairs, has built this big business, both plantations and hotels and all kinds of other business.
And now is running after those daughters.
Yeah, so we have all these phases. So, lots of names come to mind. My producer's thinking Amanda Gorman. She might be one of the contenders for young Dorothy. Like I said, I already said Angela Bassett, Viola Davis, Taraji Henson. There's just any number of more mature Dorothys that I could see in this role. But good luck to you. Congratulations to you. Just doing the damn thing, as we say, and just so proud of you and the work that you're doing, and keep lifting up voices of Black women, telling those stories that we don't know about, we don't hear about. I mean, that's what I love about this, racial reckoning moment that we're in, is that we're getting to learn so much about our history that none of us knew, even folks like me that have been to, incredible universities. So much has not been taught, and we don't have to go to college to learn. I don't have to go back to school. I can pick up a book by Vanessa Riley and learn some history here. So again, thank you, Vanessa, for sitting down with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much to Vanessa Riley for sitting down with me. What an amazing woman. Literally, this woman has a PhD in mechanical engineering. She has to be like, rocket science smart to have all of these, engineering degrees. But yet she has this incredibly passionate side of her. She wrote this amazing book, Island Queen. If you haven't picked it up yet, make sure you go to your local bookstore, go online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy your books, and get a copy of it. And if you love romance, like I have fallen in love with historical romance and Black characters in romance, she has these 2 new books coming out that are also just amazing. I can already tell she's given us a little glimpse of what they're about, Brides of London and Bashful Bride. Make sure you pick those up as well. I'm just so excited to see so many Black women who are unleashing their creative talents, who are getting big book deals at big publishing houses, and who are getting their stories optioned by production companies. So that means not only will we be watching Bridgerton next season, but we very well may be watching Island Queen. We may be watching some books from Beverly Jenkins. She has an option deal. Brenda Jackson has an option deal. So the content that's going to be available over the next year or two just really gets me excited. Just some words to live by before I get out. Don't judge a book by its cover. Yes. How many times have you heard that? Or maybe you've said it yourself. And how many times, have we actually done that? I was reminded of this quote when I first became aware of Vanessa Riley. I saw her extensive technical background. I knew that she had all these degrees in engineering. And I was really thinking, a woman that has such a big left brain, a person who's so adept in quantitative and analytical thinking, how could she possibly Riley write a passionate, sensitive romance novel? How could she do, justice to a novel that's about love, that's all sensitive, that, should make you feel warm inside? But boy, was I wrong. Vanessa Riley, she is the real deal. Not only does this sister have a big left brain, she's got a big right brain. She has serious right brain skills. Her book, Island Queen, is riveting. The story that she tells about the character Dorothy and her relationships with these three guys, her business, all of it done with such skill. The book lives up to its promise, and Vanessa Riley, even in darkness in this book, she gives you laughs, she gives you emotion. She shows you that light and love always prevail. I'm out. Y'all be safe out there. Don't forget to wear your mask. And remember, we are all in this together.